It's funny how birthdays change as you get older. When you're young, it's about cake, laughter, and surprises you think you can't live without. When you're older, it's about moments. And sometimes those moments come wrapped in ways you never saw coming. That's exactly what happened to me. On my 65th birthday, my son gave me a gift I wasn't ready to open. And no, I'm not talking about something you can tie with a ribbon or put in a box. This was different. This was personal. And it changed the way I saw him and myself. Before I tell you what happened, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I'm always curious how far stories travel. Whether you're in a small town in Texas, the mountains of Colorado, or a busy city street in New York, settle in. This one is for you. The day began like most of my birthdays do. A little phone call from an old friend, a neighbor popping by with flowers, and a quiet house that seemed too big for just me. Daniel, my only son, had promised he'd come over for dinner. He said he had something special for me. His voice on the phone had this hint of excitement, but also something I couldn't place. The afternoon sun poured through my kitchen window, painting the floor in warm amber light. I put on my favorite navy dress, not because I expected to go anywhere, but because it felt nice to make the day feel like it mattered. I even pulled my hair into a loose bun, leaving a few wisps to frame my face. By 5 o'clock, I heard the familiar crunch of Daniel's car tires in the driveway. I opened the door before he could knock. There he was, taller than I remembered, wearing that same easy smile that could melt any trouble away. He carried a small, carefully wrapped box in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, leaning in for a hug that lingered just a moment longer than usual. Inside, he busied himself in my kitchen, unpacking fresh vegetables, a bottle of wine, and a bakery box with a cake inside. It was rare for him to cook for me. Usually it was the other way around, but tonight he seemed determined. I stood there watching him, the way his brow furrowed when he chopped onions, the way his hands moved with careful precision. As the scent of sodium garlic filled the air, we talked about small things: the neighbor's new dog, the weather, a show we both liked. But underneath it all, I sensed there was more on his mind. Every now and then he glanced at the gift box sitting on the counter, as if it were silently calling to him. When dinner was ready, he poured me a glass of wine, and we ate by candlelight. He'd made my favorite roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes. We laughed more than we had in a long time. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was just the comfort of having him there. After we cleared the dishes, he picked up the gift. He held it out to me but didn't let go right away. "Before you open it," he said quietly, "I need you to know this isn't just a present. It's something I've been meaning to tell you for a long time." I felt my heart skip. There was a gravity in his voice, a vulnerability I wasn't used to seeing in him. I nodded, my hands warm against the smooth wrapping paper. He sat across from me, his eyes steady but softer than I'd ever seen. "Mom, this is going to sound strange, but everything in here, it's a piece of who I am, and I think you might see me differently after this." The candles flickered between us, and the house felt impossibly quiet. I took a deep breath, sliding my finger under the taped edge. Part of me wanted to rip it open and get it over with, but another part of me was afraid. Afraid of what might be inside and what it might mean for us. The paper fell away slowly, my pulse quickening with each layer. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to be simple. And deep down, I already knew it was going to change something between us. I peeled back the last of the paper and found a small wooden box the color of tea, its lid smooth and warm under my palm, and an envelope tucked beneath a strand of navy ribbon. Daniel's knee bounced, the only sound besides the soft tick of the kitchen clock. I looked up at him and he nodded once, a slow, reassuring yes, the kind he used to give me when he was little and about to do something brave. Inside the box, resting on velvet the color of dusk, lay a slim silver flash drive, an old-fashioned cassette tape, with my name written in careful lettering, and a brass key tied to a strip of faded blue fabric. The envelope held a short note in his handwriting, the letters fuller and more open than they used to be. "Mom, if you're willing, start with the drive, then the tape. The key is last. I'm here. We'll do it together." I felt that last line settle in my chest like a promise. Together. He wasn't dropping news like a stone and walking away. He was staying steady and present. That alone made my hand stop shaking. We moved to the living room. He had already set the old portable speaker on the coffee table, the one with the tiny scratches along its side from years of use. I plugged in the drive. For a moment, nothing. Then a soft click, a whisper of static, and a piano chord rose like a curtain lifting. It was a simple progression but familiar in the way a scent can knock you backward through time. The voice that followed, clear, a little braless, 20 and unafraid, was mine. Breathe. I hadn't heard that version of me in decades. The song was one I used to sing in the church hall on Thursday nights, back when my hair was long, and my future still felt like a room with 1,000 doors. The recording caught everything. The shakiness at the start, the strength I found by the second verse, the small burst of applause at the end. I remembered the wood-paneled walls, the folding chairs, the way my then husband, later my husband, had leaned against the door frame, smiling like the sun had just come up indoors. "How did you get this?" I asked, but it came out as a whisper. "Mrs. Hardy," Daniel said, shifting a little closer. "Your old music teacher. She kept tapes from the open mix. I tracked her down. She's 90 now, but she remembered your voice right away." He pressed a key on the laptop and faces began appearing, one after another, a patchwork of people from my past, speaking into the camera as if they were sitting on my couch with us. There was Mrs. Hardy with her sharp cheekbones and softer eyes. "Sophia," she said, and I started crying again just from the sound of my name in that tone, the one else used when they wanted me to know I mattered. "You always seemed like you were telling the truth." There was a clip of my neighbor from the old street, still wearing the thick flannel shirts he always loved, laughing about the time I hauled a borrowed piano 4 blocks on a dolly because I was determined to practice. There was a nurse from the hospital where I worked nights when Daniel was small, thanking me for bringing coffee to the team and never complaining when shifts went long. There was even my sister, who I hadn't seen in years. She smiled awkwardly, then said, "Sophia, I know we lost time, but I never lost the sound of you humming when we were kids." The video ended with Daniel himself. The camera wobbled as he set it on a stack of books. Then he sat down and faced the lens the way he was facing me now, straight on, no armor. "Hi, Mom," he said to the future me. "If you're watching this, I guess I found the courage to give it to you. When Dad got sick, you put everything you loved on the back shelf so I wouldn't miss a step. You never asked for a thank you. I don't think I said it enough. This is me saying it the way it deserves to be said." He didn't cry on the recording and he didn't cry now, but his voice had that thickness around the edges that told the truth. He closed the laptop, and in the quiet that followed, the house felt like it had taken a deep breath. "I stopped singing when your father needed me," I said, feeling the old choice press its fingerprints against the present. "And then, when he was gone, I didn't know how to start again without him sitting in the back, reminding me I wasn't crazy for believing I could." "I know," Daniel said. "That's why there's more." He handed me the cassette. I ran my thumb over my name, Sophia, in black marker like it might slide off and take the moment with it. The label on the side read June 12, 1979. He'd found the year my whole life felt like it could tip in any direction and I might land somewhere bright. "I had it digitized," he said, pulling up a file. "Mrs. Hardy gave me permission." Another song filled the room, but this time there was laughter between verses, a tiny mess up, me breaking into a laugh and starting again. The room clapping the time for me until I found the melody. It wasn't perfect. It was alive. And somewhere in the background my young husband's voice, only a breath of it, said, "You've got this, Sophia." I closed my eyes and let those words rise through years to land where I needed them most. When the last note faded, the air seemed to keep trembling with sound that wasn't there. I wiped my face and looked at my son. He had his father's steadiness, but the way he watched me was his own, curious, careful, affectionate, in a way that never tried to own me. "What's the key for?" I asked, my voice a little. He picked it up from the velvet and set it in my hand. "This part is bigger," he said, and he gave a quiet laugh, the kind you use to keep your courage from slipping. "But I need to tell you something first." We sat there with the old songs fading in the walls, and he told me about the last few years the way I hadn't heard them before. He talked about the loneliness after his father died. How he threw himself into work because grief felt like a room with no doors. He talked about the time he saw me watch a pianist at a street fair, the way my whole face changed when the player hit a certain chord, and how he followed the line of that expression for months, wondering how to give it back to me. "I kept thinking I had to be the strong one," he said. "Like if I could just keep moving, you wouldn't have to carry me and your grief and the mortgage and everything else. But moving isn't the same as loving, and I didn't know how to give you anything that lasted." I held his hand. His fingers were warm and somehow both larger, and just the same as the ones that used to wrap around mine in the parking lot. "You're here," I said. "That lasts." He nodded, swallowing. "I also did something practical because I know you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. It was the confirmation of a payment sent to my bank. 3 months of mortgage covered. "I'm not trying to fix everything," he added quickly, reading my face. "I just wanted to take a weight off your chest so you could fill your lungs. There are moments you can feel your life rearranging itself like furniture shifted in the quiet hours so sunlight lands somewhere new. This was one of them. Relief came first, then gratitude, then a tenderness that felt almost like the early days of motherhood again. This miracle that someone I love has chosen to love me back in a way that meets me where I live." I stood and slipped my feet into my house shoes. The key rested in my palm, heavier now that I knew it wasn't just metal. "Where does it go?" I asked, smiling. Despite the tears that kept coming like weather, I couldn't stop but didn't want to. Daniel stood too. "The garage," he said. "But slowly, okay? I want you to take this in like a song, not a shout." We walked down the hall, the lamplight pooling in familiar places, across the family photos, along the wavy glass of the old mirror, over the bowl that always catches my keys. The garage door groaned like it always does, and a cool breath of air rolled over us. In the center of the concrete floor was a shape under a white canvas drop cloth, big and rectangular, lit by the single bulb like a secret on stage. My heart kicked up, wild as a snare drum. I looked at Daniel. He had the look of a boy about to show his mother a project he made with both hands and all his hope. "Before you lift it," he said, and his voice softened to that gentle, respectful tone he uses when something is sacred. "I want you to know this is not about going back. It's about finally letting the part of you that never left have a seat at the table again." The key was for the side door, and it turned with the stubbornness of something that hadn't been opened in a while. The campus rustled under my fingers. Somewhere faintly, I could still hear my younger voice promising the room that I would finish the song. I took a breath that reached all the way down, feeling the weight and the lightness of 65 years at once, and I lifted the cloth. The cloth slid away in a slow ripple, folding into itself on the cold garage floor. Underneath, polished and waiting, stood an upright piano, mahogany so deep it seemed to drink in the light, its brass pedals gleaming like small suns. The air carried that faint sweet scent of varnish and something older, the smell of my childhood living room, of nights my father would tap the keys just to hear how the day felt in sound. I stepped closer, my fingers hovering above the closed lid. The grain of the wood caught the bulb's light like water holding fire. This was no random purchase. It was the same make and year as the piano I'd sold decades ago to pay for Daniel's school trip to Washington. My voice broke before I even touched it. "Daniel, this must have cost." "It cost less than not doing it," he interrupted gently. His voice had that quiet certainty that only comes when someone has been holding on to a truth for a long time. I lifted the fallboard. The keys lay in perfect rows, white and black, waiting. I pressed one middle C, and the sound filled the garage in a way that made it feel less like a room for storage, and more like a place where something could be born. The tone was warm, not brittle. Felt lived in, not new. My hands remembered more than my mind did, my fingers tracing intervals they hadn't met in years. "Play something," Daniel said, and it wasn't a request so much as an invitation. The first notes came hesitant, like they weren't sure they had permission. But then my hands found their rhythm, and the old hymn from my youth slipped out, steadying itself with each bar. It wasn't perfect. My timing was off, my touch too heavy, but it was mine. And when I looked up, Daniel was leaning against the wall, his eyes closed, smiling in that way people do when they are exactly where they want to be. Halfway through, I stopped, not because I wanted to, but because a thought struck me with the kind of force that rearranges the air around it. The piano, the music, the gift wasn't just about me. It was about him too. It was his way of saying, "I see you even when you're not asking to be seen." I stood and crossed to him. "You know, this is more than a birthday gift," I said. "I know," he replied. "It's a door. You can open it any time." We sat on the bench together, my hands over his for the first few notes of a song I taught him when he was small. He remembered more than I thought, his fingers stumbling but finding the melody. We laughed when we got it wrong and we didn't bother fixing it. The point wasn't perfection. It was being here in this quiet garage with the world tucked away outside. When the song ended, the silence wasn't heavy. It was full. The kind of silence that lets you hear the things you've been missing. You've given me back a part of myself I thought was gone, I said, my throat tight. He shook his head. It was never gone, Mom, just waiting. Later that night, after he'd gone, I stayed in the garage alone. The moonlight spilled through the high window, silvering the keys. I played until my shoulders ached, and my voice was rough from humming along. And in the spaces between songs, I thought about all the years I'd spent putting my own wants on hold, telling myself there would be time later. The truth is, later doesn't always come by itself. Sometimes it arrives in the shape of someone you raised, carrying back pieces of you that you didn't know they kept safe. I went to bed with music still in my head and the scent of varnish on my hands. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel 65 years behind me. I felt all of them inside me, rich and unbroken. I didn't just get a gift that night. I got a reminder. Some doors stay locked for years, but when they finally open, you realize you've been holding the key all along.